Jeff is an atheist. Comment here says, if our methods of detection are limited to the natural world, must any empirical evidence for God amount to a God of the gaps argument? You there, Jeff?
Sure am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you. Great to have you here.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Your question here, I'll read it one more time because it's kind of a compound question here. And correct me if I'm misinterpreting you at all. If our methods of detection are limited to the natural world, which I agree they are, must any empirical evidence for God amount to a God of the gaps argument? So is God of the gaps inescapable? So if you want to try to
Yeah,
use the scientific method to demonstrate God, you have to rely on God of the gaps, is basically what you're saying. Or am I misinterpreting that?
yeah. That's the gist of it. My
Yeah, so that's a
question is,
good.
have I misunderstood that, or do you agree with that?
I agree that the scientific method and our methods of detection, which I'm just going to put in scientific method in there, is limited to the natural world because as a methodological naturalist, I think currently tentatively that the natural world is the only thing that actually exists. So it's true in that sense. But if there is, as a methodological naturalist, though, I can entertain the thought that there's something outside the natural, and if we can somehow detect it or figure out a way to infer it in a way that we know is reliable, I'd be willing to accept such a thing exists. Whether we can test things in it, I have no idea because I have no idea what a supernatural anything would look like.
Right.
I guess my follow-up question to that would be, which usually this goes to the idea of a God. A God lives in a supernatural realm, but most people, except the deists, will say that this God manipulates and changes things in the natural. And I think that if we have a
Right.
situation like that where something supernatural can reach into the natural to change things, we can detect that. And now we have some type of line of investigation that we can exploit in order to find out more about it. But until we have that, I don't know. And that's the thing too. Like I can't fathom of a phenomenon in the world that we could observe that we could somehow say, yeah, this is supernatural because like we've eliminated all possible natural explanations. Like it's such a
Exactly.
hairball because like, yeah, it's kind of like a catch-22 because you have the supernatural and all that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
don't know.
if,
It's a good question.
if I might,
Go ahead.
the reason why I asked this question is because in my mind the answer is yes. Yeah, and I feel like that answer is interesting for two reasons. And maybe I'll just give you guys these two reasons, and I'll take the rest of the call offline here. But
Sure.
the first reason I find that answer interesting is that does it in some way contribute to the divine hiddenness argument? In other words, why would a God that wants to be known limit themselves to ambiguous evidence that might be explained by some other source? And two, if a God can only be evident in this way, should atheists make an effort to destigmatize the phrase God of the gaps? Because in this situation, there is no other way for theists to demonstrate the existence of their God.
Before you hang up, Jeff,
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, just to make sure I'm on the same page as you. So so let me pause. So we have someone who was at war and they stepped on a landmine and a couple of their limbs were lost. That person with a couple of missing limbs goes to church, people pray over them, and they're on stage, their limbs regenerate. Now nothing like this has ever happened to the best of my knowledge, but let's say that happened. You're wanting to say, even if that happened, you would be in a God of the gap situation because we couldn't rule out, because there's still a chance that was something natural that we just don't understand yet. Am I correctly understanding why you're labeling it God of gaps? Okay, cool. I needed that clarification before you dropped off, and you sure don't have to drop off. Can you quickly remind me the two questions again? Because I think I've destroyed both of. I forgot to take notes. The two questions.
It's okay. It was just there were two things that
divine
I
hiddenness.
guess there were questions, but there
divine
were the reasons.
hiddenness and destigmatizing. Yeah, I got it. I remember now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
Divine hiddenness, absolutely. It does. The fact that if there is divine hiddenness is narrower version of a problem of evil type situation where you have to have, in order for divine hiddenness to have any kind of weight, you have to have a god that wants to have a relationship with us. If there's a god that for whatever reason
Mhm.
doesn't want to have a relationship with me, then divine hiddenness doesn't matter, because that god just for whatever reason, even if it's just
Right.
the way I am, it doesn't matter. So divine hiddenness is the idea that if there's a god that wants to have a relationship with me, there needs to be at least intellectual assent so that I can make a choice to do that. And so if that God wants a relationship with me, why would he not, come up with some reason or come up with a way that is not ambiguous? And I'm 1,000% on that page with you. If an omniscient God wants to have a relationship with me, they absolutely should have access to a non-ambiguous way to prove himself. So I'm just going to
Mhm.
say yes to that first question, Jeff. I don't know if you, or Eric, pardon me, lost.
Yeah.
Eric, I don't know
Uh,
if you would agree or disagree.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much on board with that. I mean, obviously, there's very robust tests that we could potentially come up with, and we have. And as far as we know, those tests have failed. Paul was mentioning, having something up on stage, and you pray to a certain God, say certain words, and all of a sudden, limbs are regrowing back, lost eyes are regrowing back, people are rising from the dead, and you know, coming out of graves, 100 years old. There's things that could potentially increase my confidence that a God exists. Now, as a skeptic, there will be the 1, 2, 3% chances kind of creeping in there going, okay, maybe aliens are messing with us. Maybe I'm hallucinating. Maybe this is all staged. Like, as a skeptic, those are always going to be in there. And I can't
Mm.
fathom a way for those to be eliminated, especially since it's my own mind that's experiencing these things that I'm seeing. How do I know if I'm not just hallucinating? This could just be an
Mhm.
insurmountable problem getting up to 100% confidence that a God exists if we were to able like perform these miracle tests. And I'm with Paul on that. I think an almighty, all-knowing, all-loving God could have figured it out, especially since he designed the world, he designed me, he set all this in motion. He couldn't have come up with a better plan. Like, why do I have to watch Peter Popoff swindle people? We eventually found out he was swindling people, but lots of people were convinced by Peter Popoff. Why do I have to watch guys like Peter Popoff and be convinced by that? Why do I have to watch these guys grab a leg and
Mm.
extend them, or say some words and a person comes out of a wheelchair, and then the camera pans right
Yeah.
off them because they got to put the person back in the wheelchair to wheel them out of there. Yeah, I don't. It the divine hidden argument, it's a powerful one when it comes to the tri-omni God, and this is a big issue with it. But and like I hold all my positions with confidences. Like if I could potentially, my confidence could be bumped up where I go, yeah, more likely a God exists than not. More likely this God exists than not. If I was presented with consistent, reliable evidence. The second that evidence, I mentioned this last time I was on the show. Uh, Many believers seem to have this ratcheting belief system where when they see something that confirms their belief, it ratchets up their confidence, but nothing can ever bring that
Mhm.
confidence back down. No failed test, no prayer unanswered, no bad thing happening to a good person can ever bring that value down. Their confidence only goes up. Mine goes both ways. So I can see a test
Yeah.
succeed and go, "Oh, 1 point up, 1% up. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. Oh, next test failed. 1% down." Like, it's gonna
Mhm.
keep me at that spot there. Um, so that's for the divine hiddenness thing. With the God of the gaps thing, should we like normalize it, destigmatize it? Yeah, that's hard because when we're in a situation where we don't know the supernatural actually exists, and if it does exist, we have no way of detecting it or testing it. And if we did, how do we test that new system except without the science with anything but the scientific method? So unless we somehow devise some absolutely new, robust, revolutionary system of detection and evaluation, we're probably stuck in that box. And
Mhm.
up to now, for the God of the gaps thing specifically, up to now, every time we filled God into a gap in our knowledge, that gap has either shrank or been eliminated due to more study, more evidence. And it turns out that
Mhm.
not ever once was God the actual answer. Now, I'm not saying that that will continue to be the case and eventually we can eliminate all gaps and God is completely eliminated the equation. That would be problem of induction right there. But if I'm a betting man and I seldom bet, and if I had to bet that the next time we have a God of the gap in our knowledge, I'm willing to bet that we're going to shrink that and eliminate God out of that. I'll
Mhm.
continue to be confident that's going to happen until it doesn't. Not saying it's impossible, but with the
Mm.
way things are rolling, I don't ever expect that to be the case. So no, and just to answer the question directly, no, I don't think we should destigmatize God of the gaps because we have seen a track record of it being a trap and a fallacy in before, and we can reasonably expect it's going to be a trap and a fallacy in the future until it's not, which I have no
That's a
idea how we'll
weird
detect
thing
that.
it's a weird thing to
But
try and
yeah,
say, let's destigmatize something that's a logical fallacy, right? Like, why should we destigmatize begging
yeah,
the question, or which logical fallacies should we also be destigmatizing? Like,
yeah.
it's when someone presents an argument that is a God of the gaps argument, it it, it makes sense to call it out, right? Like, so the fact that there isn't a natural way to overcome it isn't the fault that it like isn't our fault, right? Like, it doesn't make it not a logical fallacy when it is used in a certain way. Now, I don't think we need to bludgeon people over the head with, pounding the accusing everyone of, because you could theoretically probably call almost any weird belief a God of the gaps belief, right? Or not weird belief, but any God related belief. You could shoehorn it in there, but when it's blatantly used that way, yeah, I'm. What are you? Why are you thinking it? We should destigmatize a logical fallacy.
So I don't know if I do think that, but I'll just say I wasn't 100% confident that we shouldn't. Um, for example, when you mentioned this prayer test with the landmine victim, you know,
Hmm.
um, if we if we're truly skeptical and we say, well, how can I know for sure that God is the cause of this? I can't exclude all possible natural explanations. At that point, does it carry the same connotation to say this is just God of the gaps? Like, is there any situation in which you believe that natural evidence might actually amount to something convincing? And in that case, wouldn't it still be God of the gaps because it's literally impossible to exclude all possible explanations because we can't know what we don't know?
I think I think I don't know. This might not be a good answer to your question, but I think the God of the gaps fallacy is when somebody, it's essentially an argument from ignorance. It's basically saying, I'm going to put my explanation in there, and until it's proven false, that's the explanation. And I hold that to be true.
Right.
It's not our goal to eliminate God as a possibility on anything. Our
Hmm.
goal is to zero in on the real explanation for the phenomena we see in the world. And I don't think we'll ever get to the opposite end of it, saying, okay, we're going to eliminate God as a possible explanation on literally everything, and God of the gaps now completely can be just completely rejected. Um, it's it's the same way. Like I said, I hold my God confidence at very very low right now, and I hold natural explanations to be really
Hmm.
really high. The God of the gaps is an inversion of that, and it's basically saying I hold God to
Hmm.
be extremely high and natural possibilities to be really really low. And the reason that's a fallacy is
Yeah.
because when you look at the sheer amount of occurrences, the sheer amount of evidence, we just talked about this with JK, with hallucinations and drug use and personal experience. Um, we have
Mm.
so many phenomenon that are all explained by natural occurrences, natural events, that the God possibility is so minuscule in there, never eliminated, but it's just so minuscule it can just be safely ignored.
Yeah.
Until a situation can be presented, like we mentioned with the miracles, consistent, reliable demonstration of miracles, that number is not going to go up. So I don't think the goal is to get
Right.
rid of God ever as an explanation. God is always going to be there as an
Hmm.
explanation, I think, but I think it can be safely ignored until the evidence really shores up and changes our perception of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so
So
much.
no problem,
Thanks, Jeff.
Jeff. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
I enjoyed that. That was a fun one.